Welcome to Our Pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are usually two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. But right now we are on Indie Mission.
Indie Mission.
We are covering The Assassin of Grins and Secrets by K.E. Andrews.
Yes.
This book was one of the SPIFBO finalists of, or last year. It was in SPIFBO recently.
Recent. Was it a finalist or semifinalist?
Semifinalist in round 7
okay.
of SPIFBO.
Okay.
So I do know that. Sorry guys.
Okay.
I'm so bad at knowing, and it is very hard to sometimes read.
Honestly, I have to
see.
Bring up the Wikipedia page to keep it straight because I'll mix up like who won and who didn't, and yeah, I can't keep up with all of it. But good for SPIFBO that it's so like prolific and doing so well.
Oh yeah, good on you. Very impressive. And apparently it was, I think, oh god, this is so confusing. Never mind. I got us down a deep dark rabbit hole, and I'm gonna get myself out of it by saying, Laura, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
Okay, so we're not talking about TV that is scripted because of the current strikes, but I watched
workers.
Yes. I did watch a documentary, and is that fair game to watch?
That is fair game.
Yeah. Okay, because none of this was scripted, but it's on Netflix. Hannah, I need you to watch it. Down for Love.
Oh yes, you told me about this.
Oh my gosh, Hannah, this is one of the purest shows I have ever watched. So it's very similar to Love on the Spectrum, where the show follows people who are going on like some of their first dates and trying to find love. They're adults, and they have Down syndrome in this series. But these episodes, I could not peel my eyes away from them. They were so good, and some of the things that are said are so sweet. I was at times saying to my husband, how come you never say something like that to me? Like that's so cute and so nice. And one of the moments that like really made me laugh was there was a guy who went on his first date, blind date, and they asked him, it might have been in the middle of the date even, I can't remember, but they asked him, do you like her? And he said, no, I love her.
Oh.
And it was very sweet. But then there's the couple that I really loved was a couple, their names are Braden and Liesel. And the Liesel's, they start by interviewing Liesel at her home and kind of telling about some of her interests and everything. And she loves her spa pool, which is a hot tub for people who are not in Australia. It's a hot tub, but she also loves sausage rolls, and those I think are
me
pigs
too.
in a blanket.
Yeah, me too, honestly.
And her dream date was to be able to eat fish and chips on the beach. And so she was set up with Braden, who kind of thinks of himself as like a player, because he just comes out of his room and he says to his mom, like, what do you think of my hot digs and stuff? And it cracked me up. But they go on a mini golfing date and it goes really well. Liesel's really good at it and everything. And then they go on another date and actually have fish and chips on the beach. And then she invites him back to her place to eat sausage rolls in the spa pool, and they become boyfriend and girlfriend and have their first kiss, which they immediately go in and report to their parents.
Oh good, every parent's worst nightmare.
Which is hilarious and awkward in the best way, because they go in and they're sitting on the couch and she's got like her hands on his chest and he's got his arm around her, and they called her dad over and they're like, we just kissed out in the spa pool. And then they're like, we're boyfriend and girlfriend and there's nothing you can do about it. It's like, he wasn't trying to do anything about it. He encouraged you to go on this date. But then they interview Braden by himself, and he's giving tips on romance and everything now, because now that he's been on a few dates, like expert. But then he follows it that he's going to cherish Liesel forever, and he says, and I'm never gonna cheat. It cracked me up because like, you've been in a relationship now of all of 10 minutes maybe, but it's good to know that you're never going to cheat. But why would that cross your mind so soon? And but anyways, this whole show is extremely heartwarming, and I did appreciate in this show something that they did that I felt like they didn't do as much in Love on the Spectrum, because there is a tendency in people with adults with developmental disabilities, I feel that there's a tendency to kind of make them seem like they're children.
Yeah.
Infantilize them.
Yeah.
And I don't like that, because they're adults. They are wholly entitled to live adult lives and have adult interests and have interest in relationships and love and sex and all these things. So something that I really enjoyed that they did with this show is they explored that a little more, what a physical relationship would look like for some of the couples on the show. And they actually, like, Brayden and Lisa went and met with a sex therapist, and they learned about sex and what different things would look like for them in their relationship. And I was pleasantly surprised that they added that component into this show, because they didn't have it in Love on the Spectrum. And people like me watching Love on the Spectrum were able to see all the cute and funny moments, but there's a reality that was missing from the show, and they added some of that back into Down for Love, and it was necessary, because these are people in their late 20s and 30s that are going to be exploring physical relationships as well. So it's important that they know things, and that this is something that they're not only taught, but that it's important for viewers to know that, yes, these are adults.
This is normal, and this is something that happened. And like, that's, I think the problem a lot of times with people with, not with people with developmental disabilities, but people who interact with them, is they think that everyone is a monolith. And like, no human is a monolith. Everyone has their own expectations. Everyone has their own wants and needs. And like, you have to address those wants and needs, and you have to do it with respect, and by not infantilizing them, and making sure that you're coming at the person at whatever level they are, like, receiving information. And like, I think too many people want to like sugarcoat it or make it not, you know, and like,
and I think too, there's a tendency for caregivers as well to want to kind of freeze the person they're caring for in time, and not have to kind of confront some of the realities of like, oh, they're old enough to explore a sexual relationship with their boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever they are in a relationship with, and kind of just freeze them in time, especially because a lot of times people with developmental disabilities, you know, have interests in things that we maybe associate with younger people. And so I think it's really difficult to find that balance in knowing that this is an adult person who may have some interest in things that are not considered the most adult.
Right.
And I think that kind of is a hard line for caregivers to stride on. But I do think that they handled it really well in this show. And
Good.
I also was really pleased that in the show they showed how, like you were saying, Hannah, how people with developmental disabilities are not a monolith, how there's obviously differing levels of ability. So there were people in the show that lived on their own in apartments, had jobs. There are other people that had caregivers and lived with them. And I thought it was nice to show that range as well.
Right.
I know that personally, I have a strong connection to interacting with people, adults with developmental disabilities, and I am personally connected to this. So when I see shows like Down for Love and Love on the Spectrum, I feel a certain way about them, just from my own personal experience. I won't get into that, but I am more connected to the issue and the issues surrounding developmental disabilities, especially in adults. But it's refreshing to see that they're kind of taking this a step forward, especially because with a platform like Netflix, this was like the #1 show for a few weeks. So a lot of people were watching this and talking about it. So it was really great to see that they're addressing some of the issues that need to be addressed about relationships.
And I hope, like, that's always my hope, is sometimes I think people who watch shows like you are personally connected. So I think sometimes, like, when you watch it, you get like, you're like, oh, good, this like helps me have a new understanding. And like, I appreciate the way they are addressing this, because they're addressing it with like dignity and with thoughtfulness and with like teaching others about the realities of this, like of what it's like to be these people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
so
like issues of consent and things like
mm-hmm.
that were brought up too. So it's not just a sex ed class. It's like
yeah, like it's a reality like of discussing. And
mm-hmm.
like I think you told me like when they went in, like they weren't quite as understanding of it. And they had a
No.
moment where they were like, this is what you're talking about? Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. I
And
mean,
so
this is a spoiler, but like when Braden and Liesel went to meet with the sex therapist, Liesel's parents dropped them off, and they were saying, Liesel and Braden were saying to each other, like out in the driveway as they're walking in, "Come along, my sexual partner."
yeah.
And they go into the therapist, and the therapist says to them, like, "What do you guys think sex is?" And they were saying things like, "Oh, upside down kisses, kisses in the dark, kisses on your cheek, kisses on your nose," and it was all related to just kissing.
Yeah.
And so the sex therapist was like, "Well, here's what I think it is. Do you mind if I show you some pictures?" And they were shown some pictures, and it was funny to me because they obviously did not really understand what they were talking about. So they were shocked.
Right.
And their faces, like the camera pans to their faces, and it's kind of like some tense music when it pans to them. But like the looks on their faces, they were really shocked. But it was, I think, important, that they understand, that they know like the things you're talking about, you're not really talking about the same things that you think you are. So, and then they went through like discussions of consent and is it okay to do this if somebody says no? And you can say no at any point. If you feel uncomfortable with something, you can stop. And I thought that was really great that all of that was included in the show, because I think a lot of people, when watching Love on the Spectrum, tended to get involved into the cute music and the funny things that were said, and it missed a lot of the reality of these are adults who want to be in relationships and want to find love, and these are adult things that happen in relationships. So yeah, it was nice to see.
And so I think
change being made.
I do hope that people, when they watch these shows, like they're doing it with that lens of like, I'm watching adults, like this is an adult show. This is not like, oh, isn't it so cute? Like I do hope that there is some dignity given to the people within the show.
Right.
Which is important to you, which is why I'm bringing it up. It's just like,
yeah,
it's good to watch these shows. It's good to make sure we're learning and like growing with our understanding of what it means to be a human in this world.
And I like, everyone is learning and growing. And I know like even myself, like in my own life, I'm constantly trying to strike a balance of knowing that someone is an adult versus trying to pigeonhole them into someone who like has this certain type of interest or this or that, so it's important to understand where someone is at and their level and meet them there.
Right. Agreed. So, are you reading anything fun right now?
Okay, Hannah. I have. So, first of all, I'll just say I read Witch King by Martha Wells.
Yes, you did.
It was so good. It was so good. I know we both were curious about how Martha's writing would be like outside of sci-fi, because we had only read Murderbot Diaries.
Right.
So I read Witch King. I had pre-ordered it a long time ago, and then it just like sat on the shelf looking at me for a long time, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna read it. And this is probably one of the fantasy books that I've enjoyed most in recent years, like of what I would call, I mean, I loved Fondelee's books, but this is more of like a traditional fantasy, I would say, less of an urban fantasy. But I think this is one of the fantasy books that I've enjoyed most in a long, long time. It's very complicated. There's complex factions and magic systems happening that you have to be paying attention. It's not something that I think you can just skim through, but I was all in. I was flipping back and forth from the map, looking up where certain characters were at what time. It's a dual timeline that's given, which is really unique, and it allows you to kind of get involved in one story. And then I noticed when I was reading it that I was getting really into one story, and then I would switch to the other one and I'd be like, oh no, I wanted more of that. But then you start reading the other timeline and the same thing happens where you get super involved in that timeline and then you don't want to switch back.
I want this one.
But the characters are really complex and morally gray, and they do really cool things, and it's it's really, really, really great.
That's good.
The story, just brief overview, follows a demon named Kai who is able to inhabit the bodies of mortals and live amongst mortals, even though he himself is immortal as a demon. And demons are connected to this world underneath. It's not like underground. It's not like hell or anything, but it's a separate world. Almost, I feel like you could think of kind of a Stranger Things, like the Upside Down is kind of what I pictured.
Okay.
But they are able to like be amongst mortals by inhabiting their bodies. So and the varying magic and abilities of demons varies too.
Right.
So Kai is unique in that he's able to, when a body is like sacrificed for him, he's able to inhabit this. For a lot of the book, he lives within the body of a young girl, but he's always addressed as a he. And so I think that was interesting, a way to play with gender in that way that happens in this book. I found that really fascinating. But this is just a really complicated book. It's also playing with colonialism and things of that nature too. And you follow Kai and Zidi on this journey as they're trying to figure out who has been kind of out to get them.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's really, really good. I would highly recommend it if you like fantasy. And if you don't like fantasy, probably you would still like it, I think, because it's really well written and just a lot of fun, and you get absorbed in it really easily. So
good.
Yeah, easily one of the best fantasies that I've read in a while. So my fears were confirmed that Martha Wells can write anything.
I love it. I love to be here.
You got to read it soon. The other thing that I've been reading, Hannah, oh my gosh. So I've been on a manga journey.
Yes, you have.
I ran out of Witch Hat Atelier and Spy Family because I read all of those that were available to me through the library. And so now I'm waiting on volumes 10 and I think 11 of those to come out soon.
Okay.
So I just typed in manga on my Libby app, and the first thing that came up literally was Rooster Fighter by Shu Sakuratani.
Okay.
And Hannah,
you said it was bad in the worst way. We did talk about this.
It's bad in the best way. It's bad in the best way.
Sorry.
I may have misphrased. It's bad in the best way. This book is, this series is so ridiculous because now I've read 2 volumes, but I was trying to get a friend on Instagram, Jones in the Books, to read these because he is also a big manga person, and he was like, I'm not reading these. And I said, but it's like a car crash. You can't look away. And he said, you know what happens if you stand too close to a car crash? You get involved. And I was like, I need someone to get involved. But this series, Hannah, it's so ridiculous. The art is great, but it follows a rooster who is trying to get revenge for the death of his sister. And
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to laugh out loud. What?
Because his sister was killed by demons. And so what happens is, just occasionally within this land, demons appear and start wreaking havoc. There's not a lot of explanation as to why the demons appear. It seems like they are kind of becoming hybrids of each other as well, too. But demons just start to appear and wreak havoc, and KG, the rooster's sister, was killed by a demon. So he is out to get revenge on a specific demon, but he's taking out all these other demons in his path when he encounters them. But how does he kill them, you say, Hannah? With sonic rooster crows, like booming cockadoodle doos that shatter their brains. And it's so funny. But there's also, how we used to watch cartoons or old mystery shows where there'd be kind of at the end of them, they would have this music that would play, and it would be kind of a voiceover of a person walking through the mist and talking about I'd get revenge on them someday. Well, this is kind of what happens at the beginning and end of Rooster Fighter, where Kiji is saying I'd get revenge for my sister someday. And he kind of looks at the camera or looks at the reader like, yeah. And I I just love that it's kind of like a take on the whole detective of it all. And
Yeah.
it's hilarious. And then there's also a lot of sexual encounters that this rooster has with chickens, but they are animal husbandry accurate.
Oh.
What? It cracks me up because and I love that they did it this way because like I live on a farm and have chickens. I know how their sexual encounters look. So it cracked me up to no end that that was how it was depicted, like accurately, and it wasn't like personified in this. But Hannah, I did not expect to keep reading this after the first one because when I first started, I was like, what is this? Oh Lord. But it's just bad in the best way because I'm just cracking up. And I think that honestly, the author wrote this intentionally to be facetious, is just trying to be ridiculous and is hitting it because this is just so funny and so ridiculous and out there that I'm already got volume 3 on board because
Hey,
why not? I
Why
just
not?
kind of needed something that was easily absorbed. I didn't have to think about and would make me laugh. And this is it. Hannah, what have you been reading and watching?
Well, first off, I want to thank you for doing the documentary. I just want to know Laura and I haven't been covering a lot of what are we watching lately because of the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strike. So make sure you're supporting those people who are on strike because strikes are how employees stay in power. There are a lot more strikes coming this year. So if you're not American, it is a huge American thing to do. And I think it's kind of gone on out of favor, unfortunately, where I'm fascinated by strike stuff. One of my favorite movies growing up was Newsies. And my dad was a member of a union his entire life, and they were protective of him during that time. So it is important to me. So Laura, I appreciate you bringing it up. And stay strong.
I think we all need to just, recognize that as a lot of money has been made for a lot of these big corporations, a lot of the people doing the work have not been fairly compensated, while a lot of the higher ups have made a lot of money. So we need to definitely be doing a little bit of internal auditing here and seeing where our money is going and to who. And a lot of the creatives involved have not been getting that. So let's start paying people for the work that they do.
Yep. And if you're interested, I want to direct people towards some people who are talking about the WGA strike from podcasts I've been listening to. The Bechtel cast, an excellent episode that was on their, it was on their Patreon, but I think, or did they put that behind
I think that was on their Matreon, but
okay, that was on their Matreons. But if you guys pay them $5 a month, you can listen to their deep dive into it. It's worth the $5 to at least listen to that. Their back episodes are hilarious. But so go listen to that. I will say that one of my favorite podcasts, Yo, Is This Racist? Where they answer listener voicemails about racism questions. They did an entire episode on the WGA strike, just some of the things that have been changing in writers' rooms. How one of them, he wrote for the show Mixed-ish, and he was able to live on the compensation for one of those episodes in ways that he wrote for that 70s show or that 90s show and was not fairly compensated at all because it was on Netflix, even though he wrote the entire episode. The way the writers' rooms have been changing due to how small series have gotten, because companies are well, we just won't pay people. They will bring in a writing room to pretty much write an episode and pay them pennies for quote unquote contractor work. So those things have been changing. These are the people who create the shows. They deserve to be fairly compensated, as Laura said. And just the way things have been changing, it is not doing that. And a huge issue they're having is the fear of AI generated things, because again, big, huge companies do not think that we are watching media with an eye towards a critical lens. And they think an AI machine could write a show just as good as humans do. And that is not accurate, because when you make that much money and you're that high up, you do not understand what people actually want. You just understand what makes you money. And those are two different things. Also, it
And
was
let me
very
just say, like, I listened to a recent episode of Fiction Fans podcast. Shout out to our lovely friends.
Mhm.
But they talked briefly at the beginning about how Lily was trying to look up how long to cook meatballs in the oven at 350. And so she Googled, how long do you cook meatballs in the oven at 350? And an AI generated article popped up. And I think probably the way that they described it was the best, where it's like,
Mhm.
nothing is technically wrong in this article, but
Mhm.
you can tell some things just don't feel human.
Right.
And I think that if we're wanting to get a human experience or be connected to media that we are consuming, we want to continue to pay humans to do this. We want to have creatives that are coming up with the art that we consume.
Right. And I think we've just kind of gotten away from recognizing art as valuable, and
Yeah.
everyone consumes art. Everyone does it, from like random
I mean,
media to everything,
all the
like
time.
everything all the time. So just start paying artists. So
Commercials, I mean,
yeah.
everything. Books,
Um,
art, cover
and
art,
literally,
magazines.
and like this is the thing, is like people who make too much money make stupid mistakes. Like Drew Barrymore is now a scab
Oh
because she
gosh,
thinks her talk show is news. Like
what a
it's
mess.
it's not, it's a mess.
That's not news.
Like Bill Maher wants to come back and like not like scab pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Uh and it's like, dude, who writes for your show? People write for your show. You're just
Right.
like, you're not supporting people. You like are worried about getting canceled. That's what all
Mm-hmm.
this is people do not want to get canceled. And they're going to use things like, well, if I get canceled, then no one has a job. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, if you get canceled, they're not going to be able to put anyone in your slot right now because people are not writing. So I don't know what you're talking
Right.
about. Um,
It
and
also is frustrating from the standpoint of like some of these executives will see stuff like that and think that they can use that as leverage and be like, well, you're going to lose your
they're
job if you don't come back. And
they're
she's
literally
okay with coming
cartoon
back.
villains. Like
So,
they're literally cartoon villains chopping down trees and paying
mm-hmm.
fines for it. And it's all a bunch of people who just don't want to make agreements. Like it is high up companies who have become conglomerates, which is why I think antitrust law is fascinating and everyone should
Mm-hmm.
focus on it, because guess what? It's about to hit the consumer, which is when people actually start caring about antitrust.
Yep.
It's about to become a problem. There's been a bunch of people who have tried to start like conglomerates again, and people are pausing on it because it's about to affect the consumer, and they're not supposed to do that. So make sure you're following along, make sure people are
Yeah.
getting paid. And like, it's not fun to not talk about media. We technically could, but we're really trying hard not to,
We're
because
trying
like,
to be supportive of
yeah,
the people on strike, and
right.
they have specifically asked that anything that is scripted, I
Yeah,
believe, not be talked about. So
right. So
we're
we're
trying to
trying,
be considerate of them.
yeah. And I know like there's been some variations on like what you can cover, what you can't, but we just haven't been covering that. So it's I just want to focus on that
Yeah, we
because
kind of think
yeah,
that it's maybe just easier to not cover
yeah.
things rather than try to
Um,
figure out what is okay and not in
what's
terms
not.
of
So
media. So we've
um
been sticking to books,
yeah.
and
Um,
obviously I've mentioned a couple of reality TV things.
yes, because that is not struck work. So
Mm-hmm.
which is the term that they've been using. So just make
Right.
sure you guys are following along with that because it is important. And you know, we also have a voice as the consumer. So if we're saying like, nope, we're
Mm-hmm.
not going to do that, guess what? Like stuff like that does help. So
Right.
um but otherwise, things I have been enjoying besides those podcasts, listened to the book number one in the novella series, Binti. You've read
Ooh, yeah,
that.
I listened to that one as well.
Yeah, by
Really
Nindi
good.
Okorafor.
Quotafor. Mhm.
Okorafor. I thought it was a ton of fun. I actually
Yeah.
listened to another one, like an earlier book that Nindi wrote, Akata Witch, and that one was like a very strange one. It was a little bit more old
Mhm.
school, like it's a
Is
young
it still
black.
sci-fi? What's the genre?
It's still like, it's more like fantasy. It's more magical realism fantasy. It's like
Okay.
a um a black girl who is albino learns that she has like witch-like powers. I think that
Hmm.
one was harder for me to follow along with. It was a little bit of a younger
Mhm.
adult book, or like younger middle school grade, I believe.
Okay.
But I really liked Binti a lot. Like it felt like a
Yeah.
change. I think I kind of walked in and I was like, oh, I didn't really like Akata Witch. And then this one I was like, oh no, I really like this one. This is so interesting. Um Binti is about a young girl who is leaving her tribe to go to Umza University. Her like where she grew up, people do not leave. They stay where they are at all times. They wear this clay to cover up their skin to keep it protected. It is like part of their ritual. And so she continues to do that on the spaceship, but then it is overtaken by these alien beings that they're supposed to be fighting against. And she is the only survivor, and she has to communicate with them. And it's so interesting. It's so weird. I just loved it. It felt like, I think sometimes with these books, I always write it akin to like, this felt like a Star Trek episode almost, where like you have to learn about different cultures, and it's more about like the politics of inner like stellar like everything, where it's just like, hey, guess what, sooner or later you can't just have war, you have to have like diplomatic discussions. And I did like that about this, and like Binti has a belief that like that will help. And so it's just interesting. I know that this is meant for like young adult to adult kind of readers, and I enjoyed that. I think it's a very interesting book. I like the sci-fi aspect. I really enjoyed this book, so that was very good.
They're really good. I need to read the next two because it's a 3 novella series. So I have the other ones on script. I need to get to them because I really enjoyed the first one too. And it's one of those that I feel like is easy to listen to. The narrator did a really good job. So if you're looking for a good audiobook, I would recommend it.
Yeah, definitely. I also listened to My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, because I am on
one of your favorites.
One of my Indigenous horror author journeys. I'm just like eating all of those types of books up. Stephen Graham Jones wrote the excellent book The Only Good Indians, or Only Good Indians, and I loved that book. I will say that this is a little bit of a harder follow. My Heart is a Chainsaw is about a character. She goes by Jade. And she is an Indian. She is obsessed with slasher films, which I'm obsessed with actually. Like my usual genre of horror is slasher. And she's kind of convinced that like something bad will happen. And recently there like 2 people disappeared in the lake, but no one knows about it. You find out about it at the beginning of the novel. And so she like ends up finding the video of something happening, and she becomes obsessed with thinking that there is going to be a huge slasher like happening in her town. She's convinced of it. After she returns from kind of like a mental health treatment. And so she becomes obsessed with this girl who she's convinced is the final girl. And she's like trying to convince her that she is. And like no one believes her because she's had these issues. And she has like some family issues. And like it's a very weird book. I wouldn't say that it's my favorite. I think I preferred Only Good Indians. This is part of a trilogy series. And I have the second book on my shelves already. Because I got it through Book Insiders. I'm like part of Simon & Schuster's like favorite Book Insider program. So I already had it on my shelves, but I listened to the audiobook of this. I think it was like, it was just a very weird book. I think it was a little too long. Like I think part of the reason Only Good Indians is so good is because it's pretty short and digestible. Where in this book, it felt like Jade kind of meanders a lot, and she goes off on a lot of tangents, which is very in vogue with her character. Like her character would do this, but when you were listening to an audio, I found myself like straying, and then I would be like, oh, is this part of the plot? I'm so sorry, I should have been listening. And so that was sometimes hard for me. And there's like layers of mystery where she's wondering who's doing this. She has like a lot of like, it's this person, no, it's this person, no, it's this person. And sometimes when you're in a horror book where it's probably like a more natural horror element, because like the opening of the book is pretty like horror elementy. It's like, because I know what's going on, or I know like some form of what's going on, it's more frustrating to be like, is it this guy? Is it this guy? And it's like, well, it's probably none of them, because it seems like it's more supernatural than you think it is. And so I just felt like it was less interesting to be inside her head when she's quite like asking all these questions. But overall, like I've only read a couple Indigenous author horror novels, and this was the first one where I was like, oh, only 3 stars. So like, I'm definitely going to continue.
Which I'm surprised, because it sounds like there's a little bit of like a psychological component to this, which you usually like. So that surprises me a little.
It was just not quite there. I think I really do think it was just a little bit too long for me. Like this book was 12 and a half hours long.
How long do you usually like lean to for your audiobooks? Because I know some people prefer like really long audiobooks, so like I'm not gonna even bother using a credit from Audible unless it's a certain length, and I could understand that, but like I use the library a lot to get audiobooks, so
Yeah.
I feel like I'm pretty willing to just get short ones,
I
and I
don't
like to just listen to them at work.
I
So
don't think I'm picky on like how long they have to be. I just think for this type of book, it was really long. Like it was just
okay.
like there wasn't enough mystery because you're like with the last one I read, like The White Horse, like there was enough mystery where it's like, why is my mom haunting me? What happened to her? And then there's also like a side story with like an issue with a
Mm-hmm.
cousin and that going on, and like an issue of like this woman's past. So there were enough layers there where this one like tried to do that, but a lot of times it fell a little short.
Okay.
um but I will say, like, I really like, obviously I haven't read that many horror novels. I feel like I found like, oh, I really like Indigenous horror novels, and I may like become more expansive after I read some of these.
Sure.
Because I just like this genre. I think it's very interesting because a lot of times in these books they do poke fun at the fact that like white people have been obsessed with Indigenous people in their
Mm-hmm.
horror like for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and it critiques that while like pointing out the issues that happen in like on tribal lands and everything that, because like
Like
white
Pet
people have,
Cemetery.
yeah, like that, yeah, like Pet Cemetery, and they'll be like, yeah, The Shining randomly was like Indian burial ground, shrug, and it's just
Uh-huh.
like,
Stephen
so
King,
there's,
what are you up to?
yeah, like why is it always like Indian burial ground, like this is what's happening, and like
I
there
know we all love
is,
Stephen King, but let's be real. The guy's got
yeah,
a lot of issues in his
yeah,
writing that we're not looking at too closely, apparently, at
right.
times.
And I do like these books because, like, with Stephen Graham Jones or like with the last author, like, it is discussing like there are a lot of horrifying things that happen to Indigenous
Mm-hmm.
people.
Yeah,
Uh, and there's a lot of trauma being felt in those like communities. So it is rife with like that kind of telling, but it's not about
sure.
white people, it's about them. Like, it's about what white people did to them. It's not about us and how we
Mm-hmm.
will be affected and how they will come after us. Like, that's usually not what
Sure.
happens. It's usually about like, so there are a lot of things that get discussed in these books that are like real and true to life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
alcoholism and like drug use is higher in Indigenous cultures because there's not a lot of money there, and there are a lot of like, because white people stole their land and stole a lot of their resources. um Go read like Flowers of the Osage Moon, or no, I forget what it's called. Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murder book. It's all about
Okay.
how like that is a true retelling of like an Indigenous group of people were were pushed out into like this non like arable land where they couldn't make anything, they couldn't do anything, and then they struck oil on that land that was given to them, and it was like late enough in time where they were able to do that. And guess what happened? White people started showing up and killing Indigenous people and getting away
Shocked.
with it. And because it was like, I forget what era this was in, but it was in the earliest 20th century. So it's not like we're talking about like the
Mm-hmm.
1800s. Like, it's
Right.
early 1900s. These people were like millionaires, and like white people came in and were like, here's all the alcohol, here's all the gambling dens, oh, we're going to murder you, and like got away with it for years because, quote unquote, like, of course, it's just like all of it, it's, a lot of stereotypes of like the quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote like drunk Indian, or all of these like preconceived notions about Indigenous people that were not truthful,
Mm.
but were also based on what white people did to them. So there's like a lot of stuff that goes into
That
these
sounds
horror
like a good
novels.
book.
It's a really good book. I loved that book. I read it in 2017. Um and I only know that because I read it when I was living in Texas, and I was like, oh,
Sure.
Oklahoma's right there. And I believe it's set in Oklahoma. So
Well,
pick
with
up
the
that
oil
book.
and everything, so that
Yeah,
would make
yeah.
sense.
And so pick up that book. But like, I think reading about the like this culture is very unique and interesting, and I think
Mm-hmm.
telling it from a horror lens, like there's a lot of like respect for cultural storytelling for the culture, while discussing issues that like have been part of the Indigenous community a lot of times at the hands of white people. And so like
Yeah.
reading these horror novels have a different lens for me that I think makes me fascinated with them.
Mm-hmm.
um and like has a different feeling than just like
Sure.
sometimes other horror novels. I'm like, am I really interested in like reading about a white man who's like surrounded by murder? Not really. So
I'll admit
I
that horror seems like that's a blind spot for me, but
mhm,
I don't do well with scary stuff, and thrillers are about as much scariness as I can handle, I think, a lot of times. Granted, I handle a lot of scary stuff in like fantasy, I think,
right.
and
And
science fiction, but it's easier, I guess, when it's less real.
yeah.
I don't know.
I
I
don't
I,
know.
I
I
think horror is
agree.
like a blind spot for me, and I don't find myself drawn to it as often. And
Yeah.
I'm slowly working out of liking thrillers, so I don't do as much scary anymore.
Yeah.
But I think some of these sound interesting. That nonfiction book I definitely will be checking out.
Check out that book. It's fascinating to read about. Like it's horrifying because it's just like all of these police officers being like,
Sure.
well, they drank a lot, so they're gone. And it's like, no, they were definitely murdered. And like nobody
Right.
gave a shit about them. And that's so wrong because like it was people and it was like predatory. Like people would be like, oh, look at this will. They gave me all their money. And it's just like,
Hmm.
awesome, great. Nobody asked questions. So that's a fascinating. I think it's supposed to like they were trying to make that a movie with like Leonardo DiCaprio as one of the evil people in it. So
Interesting.
um, but yeah, so I find this kind of discussion interesting. I find
Hmm.
this type of horror fascinating. I haven't really
Yeah.
read any other horror like other than like It by Stephen King, which I don't really necessarily say is a perfect horror novel or like
Hmm.
but I don't like pure ghosts. I think sometimes with these horror novels it's easier cuz like if there is a haunting, it's not like we all go into a spooky house and we're stuck there and we all slowly go insane. It's like no, there might be someone haunting, but like you know, it's more like hunting
Sure.
them down than like and I also think that that's interesting about like I think a lot of horror, I haven't read a ton of horror, but like a lot of
Hmm.
horror that like has been pretty mainstream in our society or like the like I went to a hotel, we are stuck there for a while and everyone gets murdered. And
Hmm.
like for that, I don't like spaces where ghosts are kind of like stuck and you're just sitting there like, oh my God, because like I
Sure.
sit in my house a lot, so I don't want a ghost to be here. But like sometimes like these like more
But it
like
is.
but it is like no, oh my God, please don't say that. But like sometimes with these like other ones it's more about like the trauma is the horror and like
Mhm.
because trauma was felt like this spirit has to go hunt and kill the people who
Sure.
were affected it and I'm like yeah I kind of vibe with that more than I vibe because like I
Sure.
hope I don't do that to any ghost like I hope I don't wrong someone but like I don't want like ghost stories that are just like one setting. I like these a little bit more because they're interesting and it's
Sure.
discussing other things than just like murder house like but yeah so I read that as
Murder
well
House or
so
Girl on the Run. Like,
yeah like and so this one's interesting and even at the end of it like there it is kind of sad so I can't wait to see where the next book comes
cool.
and Jade's not perfect and she's dealing with all of her own stuff so all
Did it.
right should we get into it though
Let's do it.
all right so this book The Assassin of Grins and Secret by K.E. Andrews um
Grins and Secrets.
so in
This
the
is
first
appropriate title to whisper.
yes it is because it's secret so this book cuts in and we meet Saren who is locked up in a dungeon and
Do you say
she's
it's Saren or were you saying I was for some I need an audiobook to tell me how to pronounce these names, but I was saying Serene.
Serene. Oh, you're probably right
I think we're gonna be able to talk with K.E. Andrews, so we
very
will just
soon but
ask how to say these names because I've come to the conclusion that that's just the better way to do it is just ask the author how to pronounce them.
right I agree Saren okay so Saren
Say Rain?
Saren so say
Okay.
okay now I just have an audio
My brain
repeating
always lies to
Serain.
me.
So Serain, we meet Serain. She is locked up in a dungeon. She appears to be talking to a voice in her head that may be death. She like refers to it
Hmm.
as death. She refers to it as a couple different things. Um, and it's
Which I
time for
always
her.
like when stories play with this concept of death as a character because like the book thief does that. And
Oh,
not a spoiler because this book has been out forever.
yeah.
So it's other people's fault if they haven't read this bestseller. But
Sucks to suck.
It's like suck, spoil. But that Death is an interesting character to include. I think so. I always like when authors play with that.
Nice.
Sorry, keep
so
going.
yeah, she's talking to Death, and
Maybe
Death is telling her that it didn't train her for this. She's also apologizing to someone she calls Sun and Stars for not being able to survive for them. Her captors kind of are like talking around her, and they're like, she isn't very, and we also find out during this time that she has chromomania, or not chromomania, what am I, chromesthesia. Why? I was on my horror kick. Chromomania. It's been, you're obsessed with
manic
colors.
about colors.
Laura is manic about purple, and I'm manic about blue, and I will not be answering any questions about that.
The thing that's going around that, like, I'm getting really off of this topic, but there's like a pink sister versus purple sister thing that's happening where apparently in families that had two daughters, one was the pink sister and one was the purple sister, and the pink sister is usually the older sister and the one that's more of a type A personality, and the purple sister, but I think more of what it is, it's like we as a society assign colors to girls and boys, and so if you have two girls and you want to just designate whose stuff is who, you're going to give one all pink and the other one all purple,
right? And
it just kind of happens that way, that the first daughter probably would get pink, right? But it's funny to me, I saw a TikTok where it was somebody saying, me, a pink sister riding in my friend who was a purple sister's car, and there was like standing water in the cup holders, and, like just garbage everywhere, and I had to laugh so hard at that because I haven't been on. Gosh,
I have not been on pink or purple sister TikTok, but I have been under the discussions of how like randomly it's come up that like men think about the Roman Empire all the time.
Okay, like, I had seen something about this and I didn't do enough of a deep dive on it.
So I looked to my fiance and I was like, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And he goes, not that often, like once a week. And I was like, once a week? Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean once a week? And he's like, I don't know. He just started thinking about how they like created aqueducts or this, or, and I'm like, I've talked with his sister and we were both like, is he trolling us? Like, does he actually think about the Roman Empire once a week? Because like, it turns out lots of men think about the Roman Empire and they don't think it's that often because it's only once a week. I cannot tell you.
I never think about it. I mean, unless I have to watch a movie.
Nope, doesn't come across my mind. Never.
I probably think about pink versus purple sister more than I think of Roman Empire.
And now I'm just thinking about how men think about the Roman Empire once a week. And like, that's upsetting.
It's weird that they would think about it that often, I guess. Interesting.
I don't know.
But he said it's related to aqueducts. And
well, for him, he's just like, we just start thinking about like how they created aqueducts, or he's like, or like sometimes you're like, oh yeah, like the Greek god system and the Roman god system are really similar. And it's like, that's not something I think about all the time.
Yeah, not that often. Like if I'm reading Percy Jackson, maybe I'm going to think about Greek and Roman gods and how Rick Riordan screwed up some of that a little bit with
what you gonna do
with mixing them. But anyways,
but yeah, so anyway, back to Roman god talk. No,
yes. So back to assassins.
So her captors are kind of talking about how she's not really worth that much profit, despite the fact that she is a famed assassin.
Yeah, they're all kind of like questioning, like, seriously, is this the person that everybody's been talking about? Because it seems unlikely.
It cannot be a woman, and also like
this tiny woman.
And also, like, how do they all know she grins? Because if she's secret, maybe she shouldn't be telling everyone she grins when she kills people. Like,
yeah, I'm just confused by this a little bit as well, because they're like, she grins when she kills people. I'm like, okay, that's not.
But you also didn't know she was a woman. Like, yeah, how would you know she's
not the subtlest of assassins? Apparently,
right? I don't know.
And what's the line between just assassin and like flat out like murderer? I don't know.
She's on it though. So they consider sending her to the fighting rings, even though she has kind of been starving for months and she's like really run down.
Yeah, and there's like a ton of bugs in her hair and everything. That was gross to me. Like, I could not handle the descriptions of the hair because it gets into it.
We also find out that she is Ravenasi. Or Ravenasi, I'm just going to call it this.
Sure.
I apologize for butchering the terms. I do know that this is like somewhat Moroccan based, but I don't know how much, and I don't know so we're not going to get into that as much.
Yeah, we don't know
And so
We don't
I
know the ins and
apologize
outs of
if I
the culture.
yeah,
So
so if I mispronounce something, I do apologize.
yeah, please
But
come at us with the correct pronunciation.
yes. But Ravanasi, people, it means that she's from the Old Kingdom and she has immortal blood. And later in the book, we do find out that that means that she is linked to the use of magic. So she could potentially use magic as someone from the Old Kingdom who was like born from the immortal blood.
Which it's interesting because like magic is something that is like kind of tangible and brought into places and can be removed. So
Right.
I thought that was an interesting magic system to incorporate into this.
And she also has chromomania, as we talked about. She's obsessed
Chromomania.
with the color pink.
No, it's chromesthesia because like
Chromesthesia.
and I'm a little confused with how it works. I haven't looked into synesthesia as much, but it seems like at least Serene's version of this is like when she is hearing something like coming into her, like a sound comes towards her,
Right.
she sees a color.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and it's kind of described at the beginning of the book where like this is her like specific type.
The author's like interpretation of this.
Yes, and it's
not like a 1-to-1 for chromesthesia.
Yes. And she does note that like everyone experiences synesthesia and chromesthesia differently. And this type is when sound evokes the experience of color, shape, or texture, either outside their own body space into the world or existing within their internal mental space.
Yeah, this seems to be just colors, though. I don't know that I've noticed many textures.
No, I don't think so. Well, and I think sometimes the colors are supposed to have different textures. It's more in the glossary.
Okay. I haven't gotten into the glossary too much then.
Yeah. That's fine.
I will say though that it seems like certain colors are associated with like certain emotions or certain similar tones.
Yeah, because like certain voices all have like yellow tones a lot of the time.
Right, like lemony, like they're kind of sour. Like things that have been said are kind of sour, and like bells are kind of like a golden.
Yeah, and so there are those types of things. So she is taken out of her cell and she is like taken to the fighting pits eventually. And she's kind of like, I'm definitely going to die here. I will not last long. I'm just not powerful enough right now. It discusses that she's been in 3 different fights in the fighting pits in the next chapter. And like she fights with a sword. It's not her main focus of weapon. And she's kind of unable to own her own. So she has been beaten 3 times. She's kind of cut up a lot and she's
what kind of way to like treat people is that, where it's like, get in these fighting pits, you lost, we're gonna beat the crap out of you, like what the heck.
And it's like also talking about how she's like cut up, and that's saying a lot because like her body is covered with scars, her face and her entire body. She gets sent into another fight with a blunt object, so she's like, okay, they're ready for me to die now, like that's what's going to happen. And she fights a much more muscled man and she finds an opening and she ends up killing him. And her handler is super mad because he's like, I told you to like hold your own to like maybe get me some better betting, but like I didn't tell you to win. And now I have to deal with the owner when like that person was worth more than you were. And then a voice comes through and says, I will take her off your hands. 2 men start arguing to get Seren sold to them. The person who wishes to buy her blackmails her current owner, saying that like the man fudges numbers in order to move more prisoners out of a prison. And we discover that this is the Prince of Sardan, Ramses. Sardan is a kingdom between the Old Kingdom and Ginjarr, ruled by the prince's father. A Malik is like the term for him. Serene,
which I'm assuming is similar to like a king.
Yeah. Serene, I mean, he's a prince, so I assumed.
Yeah, it's just, I think, kind of a monarchy situation.
Yeah, Serene believes that the Malik is evil and a warlord, and we discover in the first half that he murdered her family in front of her, so she has every right to believe this. He wants to hire Serene as a personal bodyguard, since she has a
reasons unknown at this point.
Yes, but because he kind of is like, because you're a famed grinning assassin, and he doesn't know why she grins, but he's kind of into it. He is with the chief of guard. His name is Yuria, or the head guard of like the entire army or whatever. He is a Ginjarr who lives near Ginjarr. So sorry,
I love it.
I had to say that.
That is perfect, Hannah.
Thank you.
Why did I not make that connection? I'm so mad.
It's a Ginjarr near Ginjarr. So she grabs a dagger from Yuria and she holds it to Ramsay's throat, which is a big deal because she does end up bringing up, like, in the next 3 chapters, like, remember when I held that dagger to his throat? I could get murdered for this, because, like, it's a threat to the prince's life.
Well, and also it's just like an insult to somebody that's trying to help you, especially like a prince. There's like certain protocols and everything. So it's one of those things where it's like in your first interaction with this man who's offering to save your life, you threaten to kill him. Like, that's very rude.
It's very rude. Very rude. Not nice.
That's very rude of you to do that.
So Ramses is like, it's fine. Like, I trust her. We're not gonna say anything about this. It's totally okay. I'm gonna, like, give you your freedom if you work for me for 6 years. But Yuria,
which seems like a long time.
Also, like, Yuria beats her, like, for holding the dagger, and it's like, well, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Especially when Laura, like, kind of got love interest vibes, and I was like, don't beat your potential love interest.
Yeah,
like,
I do get some love interest vibes, because there's definitely some back and forth that we get here with Yuria as we're, like, seeing interactions between Sarene and Yuria, because it's like Yuria is the only one that she will talk to. She's picking up on all these things about him and everything, and
as time goes on, she spends a lot more time with Ramses, so I actually got love interest vibes from him. So Laura and I are like, potential triangle? We don't know. We shall see. So he gets her to sign the contract for 6 years after he's like, do you read? There's a TikTok I listen to, and it's like a woman pretending to be her German mother. Like, she lives in Canada, her mother is German, her father is Italian, and at one point she goes, Laura, do you even read? Or no, she goes, Laura, when is the last time that you read? And it's like,
I dig it.
I know, and it's so do you even read? Like, so she does sign it, but Yuria seems to hate her. She has
no reason that we can figure out at this point.
I mean, every time he gets into his POV, he's like, I don't trust her. She was once an assassin. And it's like, dude, you have murdered people. Calm down. Go touch grass. Like, calm down.
We find out that Yuria was a soldier in the war. And so obviously has a lot of PTSD and trauma related to that. But
he, like, is also very, like, judgmental of the fact that she earned a living by being a killer, and he's like, I was a soldier, so there's honor in it. You just murdered people for money.
And I will say that Sarene, like, brings this up and is like, really? So you just because you can explain it like that means that it's better? Like, I don't see a difference here. And it's like, fair point.
So they head out. And, like, on their travels, Yuria is super tightly wound, and she's, like, thinking of all the ways she can double cross them. And he does not think he's like, how could she be an assassin? She's so skinny. But
and it's funny. I mean, it's funny to me too, because obviously, like, Sarene is, like, someone who's very perceptive and can figure out these things about people, because there's, like, anytime she encounters somebody new, she's like, they look like they're 35. They use this hand and they have done this amount of things or whatever. But she keeps, like, messing with Yuria and is like, what was it like growing up on a farm? And how are all your siblings back home? And he's like, what? And it's just like, you just seem like an oldest child.
Oh my gosh.
So I dig that.
I also, there is, like, something cultural where certain, like, you do think it's impressive that she's this perceptive, but I will say that at some point we do find out that people wear bangles with the number of years that they've been alive, and it's like, oh,
but not everybody is doing that.
But a lot of times, like, oh, sometimes you're just counting the rings.
But anyway, their age and, like,
so she's kind of
like that.
messing with him on their ride. And Sarene knows that there's more to her being hired. She's like, I just don't trust these people. And she, like, since I'm a woman, he hunted me down, like, but she doesn't really know what. She does find out, and you're right, she, like, tells the captain, like, your guys are hiding from something, and he's like, you're very perceptive, I do not like you. At one point, like, Yuria and Ramses, like, go away to discuss her, and there is more to know, it seems, where they're like, there's a reason we got her, and I can't trust you because you're the captain of the guard, so, like, your loyalty is to my father, I need someone loyal to me, yada yada yada. But Ramses is like, I have to make her trust me before I can tell her, because, like, I can't just tell her right out, there's too much writing on this. Yuria can't be involved. Like, he's like, okay, fine, whatever. And then there's an ambush, and like some of the men get killed while they're having this conversation. I actually really enjoyed this part because like all of a sudden there's an arrow, and like Serene looks at it and then she just rolls away.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is comical. And like obviously she like gets up and fights with like an arrow, but I just like, it kind of reminded me of like Captain Jack Sparrow, like in like Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, just like get out of the action here.
Like,
I'm just gonna
roll.
I'm not involved in this.
Like, I'm going to go away now.
Keep in mind, I'm tied up.
And then she like helps ambush some of the men who try to capture them. She's able to kill a couple, and then like Ramses is like, hey, she just helped us, like, let's treat her with dignity. And Yuria is like, no. And so they kind of dress her. She gets ready for bed, and she goes to sleep, and she hears the voice saying that he can always find her, because she's like, well, at least I'm hidden now. And he's like, no, you're not. To get to the palace, Serene is put into a tall tower where she kind of has a lady's maid named Rizwana. And Serene is collecting bones to use as weapons. I also enjoyed this part where it's like she's sucking on a rabbit bone, and she's like, maybe I could stab someone. And later she's like, I don't think this will be very effective for stabbing someone, but like it makes me feel better. Okay.
I mean, it's small, and you probably have to like dry it out a lot, I would assume, to
so
make it a good weapon.
So we also find out like the old kingdom used to have magic where people would like work with the immortals or like have like magic coming from like their connection to the immortals, but that is pretty much like her entire people have been wiped out, likely from the Malik. And she is like super excited to be in the palace because like her only goal is to kill Ramses' father. Yuria just like keeps coming into the room and being like, I'm going to be mean to you, okay, goodbye, and I don't trust you. And she's kind of like, yeah, okay, like I know, I get it, thank you.
But then like her reactions to him are pretty funny, because even like the lady's maid that is in there is like, you shouldn't keep coming into a woman's dressing room. And then Serene like kind of picks up on that too, and it just makes jokes out of it, like, ooh, what are you doing in here, trying to get a glimpse? And that just like pisses him off in the best way.
Yeah.
Like, I am always serious and moral.
I'm so moral. I would never look at you. I'm just gonna come in here and scream at you.
Yeah.
Ramses goes and meets with his father, Sethos, who berates him for leaving the palace. I guess because he's the prince, he should never leave and never learn anything about his people.
I feel like it's kind of a take on like, you are supposed to stay here and be like the representative for the royal family. You shouldn't be running off and being a playboy.
Hiring people. Like, you can't just go hire guards yourself. You should only trust my people.
I get the impression though that maybe Ramses is kind of trying to be, or the author's kind of trying to portray Ramses as a playboy of sorts, like a playboy prince.
Because he kind of like goes home and he goes and he sees his mistress and he's like, yeah, I like her because she's not like, she doesn't really want strings attached. We're pretty chill with each other.
So I think that maybe there's a little of that to the relationship with the parents, where they're just kind of like, this kid is out of control. And
his father's like, you shame our gods. And then we meet Ramses' mistress. Serene has to meet up with Daddy Sethos, which is what I called him in my notes. And she wants to kill him because he murdered her family right in front of her. He belittles his son for hiring a woman. And like, he's pretty rude to her. He's like, you're an assassin. I don't trust you. I give you a week. Da, 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 da. Ramses asks Yuria to train Serene because he can only trust Yuria. Yuria hates her guts and he thinks she wants to kill everyone. And she's like, no, just the Malik, I promise. Okay. He does start to train her. She isn't as good with the swords, and she's used to like subterfuge and murdering people. Even though they can see her grinning face, she usually gets away. And also she's half starved, so she's like, I'm not ready for this. Could you like give me some time? But it's a rough go. He won't let up on her.
And also like another thing that's mentioned is like, the clothes that they make her fight in are just not conducive to movement, where it's like, that's not necessarily fair that he gets to wear like clothes that don't restrict his movement, and then she has to be kind of working around a lot of fabric.
Well, and she's also like, could we ever use daggers? And he's like, no, you must get good with the sword because that's how soldiers work. And she's like, well, isn't that like a bad idea to make sure everyone works the same way? And he's like, no, it's how people do it. I am a Ginjarr.
And he says, I am a ginger.
From
A
Ginjarr,
justification.
from near Ginjarr. At one point, she does convince him to fight with daggers, and she's like much more able and capable.
Yeah.
When she's
Well,
using
and like she
daggers,
kind of
so.
tricks him into it at this point and is like, if I do this, if like they make a bet basically, and she's like, if I win this bet, then we do our next fight with daggers. And he's like, haha, you will never win. And then he loses because she tricks him and is
fights dirty and
fights dirty, and it proves her own point of like, oh, maybe we shouldn't always be reliant on people to, you know, follow the rules, quote unquote rules.
Especially when we're like trying to protect a prince and people might fight dirty. Like,
Yeah,
did you ever
they're
think about
not
that?
always gonna
Like,
just be like, let's walk straight up to each other and fight with one sword.
On guard.
Yeah, like, that doesn't happen, Yuria. I'm
Right.
sorry about you on your farm, but
and we do find out like Yuria is like an oldest child who like his family relies on him a lot for like
yeah, he's like sending money back to them.
He doesn't really get to see them very often. He kind of talks to Ramses, and Ramses like, hey, like, what's going on? He's like, well, my sister's probably gonna get married soon. I like won't
I
be able
haven't
to
seen
make
a
it
lot of my
back.
younger siblings. This really
Like,
sucks. I miss them.
My parents are leaning on me a lot. Like, it's a lot. So we know that like he has a lot of stressors coming from his side of things for why he follows along with everyone so well. We also learn a little bit more about like Ravanasi people and like their relationship with older gods. And then we learned like Ramses' father slaughtered a lot of them after he lost his older brother, and he like blamed them for it. It brought on a huge war. He wanted to avenge his brother and use this. And Serene kind of thinks that it was probably an excuse. She thinks that it was she thinks he probably murdered his own brother, and she kind of thinks Ramses is naive for thinking differently.
Which just makes a lot of sense to me. I think that was cleverly written by the author because that makes the most sense. And it seems like a plausible thing that would happen in this situation.
And a lot of this book is her being like, he's awful to you. Like, how do you not see it? And like, he'll be like, no, my father was so kind before his brother died. Like, but he was much younger then. So there's maybe
people change.
not as,
and also maybe your dad was nice to you, but
maybe
dads aren't always nice to people who they aren't the dads of.
Right. But like Ramses throughout this time is trying to like gain trust for her. During this time, she allows him to ask her one question a day, and she stays pretty true to it. Where she'll like, if he
she's like, is that the question?
Yeah, and if he asks a bad question, she's like, it's not my fault you asked a bad question. Like, that sounds like your problem. But he's trying to make a connection with her. He like takes her to the kennels one day, and like Yuria's always around them, and I call him Mr. Brood. Like, she's just sitting there brooding.
And she's like picking up on things that they don't notice, which is baffling to me. Like, how could they not notice that the tiger was pregnant?
Oh my god. I said she diagnoses a tiger with pregnancy.
Like,
they're like the tiger hates being around other men, and she's like, yeah, she's pregnant, you assholes.
Like, oh my gosh. She's like, because it's mentioned like she reaches in and like touches its bulging belly, and she's like, oh, that's why it's pregnant. And they're like, what are you doing? Get your hand out of that tiger cage. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Where are the veterinarians?
I know. Well, and it talks about how like it's an older gentleman with bad eyesight. So it's like, he's running the kennel, so he's not gonna know. But the other guys, it's like, come on, dudes, look at a tiger.
Yeah.
We also meet Ramses' mother, who we find out is kind of like obsessed with his baby brother, like keeps him very close to the chest. And his little sister, Rasima, who is obsessed with Serene. Like, she's like constantly coming up to her, being like, I want to meet you. I want to talk to you. Why are you wearing those clothes? And like in this culture.
And it's kind of like I kind of picked up on like a young girl. Like,
being like, you're so cool. You're so independent.
I want to be like that.
And like there's hints of that too, because like the daughter, because she is like part of royalty, is supposed to have her face veiled, and like she doesn't always have that. They're supposed to wear like head dressings, all of that stuff. So during this time we also find out that Yuria is often dreaming of drowning,
and of specifically Serene drowning
him, and he like can't seem to sleep, he can't seem to do anything, and like we do find out in the book that like part of the war is his PTSD, and he like had an issue with like water and like people being drowned due to like some of the decision making he had done. And so he like is very scared of water. At one point, like Serena's out on the beach with him, and she like goes into the water and he won't follow her, and she figures it out. So it's like an interesting kind of discussion of PTSD and everything.
Right.
we also like have moments where like Sarit's just minding her own business, and then all of a sudden Sethos will pop up and be like, "Follow me," and like takes her
Well,
down to
it's like his guards just like
yeah.
suddenly pop up, which was something that was hard for me to understand a little bit because like Serene is like sneaking out. She's been making maps in her free time of the
Mm-hmm.
palace and everything and the grounds because she's kind of trying to figure out how to escape
Yeah.
and how to like best attack Sethos. And so it kind of baffling to me that somebody that's supposedly like really good at like sneaking around and not being caught, there's all these people that just like as she's exploring the palace, they just pop up and they're like, "Come with us." And it's like, "Whoa, where'd you
What are you
get
doing
there?"
here? Yeah. And so he like at one point brings her down to the dungeons and shows her a fae who was caught with magic. And
Mhm.
like the fae gets beaten and like threatened, and he's like, he won't be long for this world. And she's very horrified by that moment. She also meets his master of spies, Makalana, and he's kind of like Sethos's right hand man who works with
Mhm.
these things called the Golden Jackals. And he's like, "You should join up with us. We could use you." But he kind of like hints that she would have to spy on Ramses, and
Yeah.
she's like, "Nah, bro, I'm here for my 6 years and then I'm out."
Mhm.
And she doesn't trust him. She does like tattle to Ramses about this, and Ramses is like, "Oh, that's not great. I didn't think they would do that. Like, are you loyal to me, please?" And like as she's coming back to her room from the Golden Jackal situation, she's like starting to undress, and Ramses accidentally sees her, and he's like horrified
By the
because he
scars
sees
and
like she has
everything.
scars on her body. She gets dressed, and he like discovers she's a drawer. She's an artist during this time.
Mhm.
Um, but like he's just trying to make a connection. He takes her into the city to see everything. Hidden as just like a regular old nobleman, and she's like, "Dude, your eyes are like a very specific color,
Yeah.
and everyone knows you're the prince." But he like takes her to some shops. She accidentally gets in trouble for touching things because like she is
Mhm.
seen as a slave. Um, and she kind of talks to him about like his own privilege, where she's like, "Well, you own me," and he's like, "No, no, no. We just have a
Yeah.
contract where you have to work for me for 6 years and do exactly what I
And she's like,
say."
"Yeah, that's
Yeah.
indentured servitude."
and
Okay.
and she kind of like points out his own privilege, where she's like, "You think you're so much better than your dad. You keep talking about how much you changed, but you act just like him." um and he like takes that kind of hard because he is very privileged, who like doesn't want
Mhm.
to think about that stuff. But he does take her to like this like rooftop where she meets with two people who Bakir and Rajaya, and they're like this couple. Bakir is deaf, and like they don't know he's the prince, and she's like, "Yeah, they don't
Mhm.
quote unquote know you're the prince, but like your name is Ramses." And he's like, "Well,
Right.
I would have used a fake name, but like they met me a long time ago with Yuria.
Like
I
when we
had
were
like
kids and
yeah, and like we cleaned up their roof when I was trying to convince Yuria to steal something, and he wouldn't do it because he's Mr. Rules." And
now we
like
go over and have meals with them and stuff.
yeah, and we like help fix up their house. And it's very much like, "Hey, you're the prince. You could help with like infrastructure issues, but you're just helping this like one person who you like.
Yeah.
So like, come on, my guy." Um, but like they meet, they kind of walk away. And so we also kind of slowly discovers he wants to like start looking into his father more and more, that he
Mhm.
doesn't trust him. He thinks he's slowly devolved into something like
Yeah, this is where we
awful.
start to kind of learn the motive
Mhm.
behind wanting Serene to be there. And it's more of like a, I need somebody to kind of look into my father. And you
Right.
seem like the best bet for that because even though I
Yes.
trust Yuria, I think he's still a little too loyal to the
Mhm.
royal family.
And so she's like, "Yeah, I don't trust your father, obviously." So yeah. On their way home, they get attacked. She wipes out two of them, but she's like, "Wow, these guys are not really attacking us thoughtfully as I thought they would." And then we find out that it was a test from Yuria, and he
Hmm.
like sent in some of his men. And like one of them, she like actually very much injures. And she's like, "Wow,
Yeah.
you guys are bad at this. You could have tested me in so many better ways."
She's like,
Um,
now I've almost killed someone. Great.
yeah, great. So the next day she is promoted to a bodyguard, and she starts following Ramses around, and he kind of like shows her these maps, and she's like, "Oh man, those last 100 pages would have been really helpful if I had known I could just look at the maps."
Uh-huh.
And he kind of like wanted her to look at the maps so she could start checking
Yeah,
out
he
things
was
for
leaving
him.
them open.
Yeah. And they're kind of like talking more. And he kind of has her start spying for him. They're discussing things like the war, magic, all these issues. And like he's just like, "Yep, this is kind of what I want you to do." So they're kind of discussing how to go about that. And then we come to the fact that like there's a masquerade ball soon.
Hmm.
And she's like, "Oh, well, everyone's busy. I'll go like searching around places." And Rizwana's coming to like talk to her and be like, "Are you coming to the party?" And she's like, "Probably not." And then Ramses is like, yeah, you are. You're definitely coming to the party. You have to come spy on people for me.
It's the perfect opportunity, and no one will know who you are.
And he also is like, why is my sister here? And it's like, because she's obsessed with Serene. How do you
like
not
she's
notice this?
hanging around all the time.
So Serene like gets dressed up for the ball. She heads downstairs and she's kind of pretending to be this widow because she's not supposed to be like without an escort to introduce her to people, but if she's a widow, it's a little bit easier. And so she meets this man who's like older,
and she kind of ends up like dancing with certain people and gaining some information, and
because she meets with this man called Hasim, and he's like 57 years old. He lost his wife, so she kind of like connects with him over the loss of her fake spouse and his spouse. And so they dance a little bit together. They're chit-chatting. He seems like to know a little bit about the war, and he doesn't seem as sympathetic with the king. And so she's like, oh, I could probably use that against like everything, and it's helpful. And then at one point, she like dances with Ramses, and then she's like, oh, I have way too much attention on me now that I've danced with Ramses. So she goes to change her like the way what she's wearing, her mask. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. And she's like, man, it smells weird. And then doesn't at this point Uriah come up and like yell at her because he thinks she's someone else?
Which Uriah needs to do a little bit of training.
Yeah,
because I feel like his methods are a little
just to like come in and scream at someone.
He needs to see HR.
And Serene also notices that like someone's using magic and she doesn't think it should be possible here. And like,
which I'm trying to remember, is she the only one that's like picking up on the magic?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's because she sees an immortal, and like it's like usually, or she hears an immortal like ancient language talking, where she doesn't recognize the person. They're like in a silver fox mask, and he's like talking to, she recognizes like the immortal language he's using. So she's the only one who can see it. She's the only one who can hear it because she like recognizes it.
And doesn't she like try to move for him, but then gets like cut off by somebody?
Yeah. And they're kind of talking about how the king like has mostly dried up magic, but he's not finished yet. And so she's kind of just overhearing all this, and it's becoming like more mysterious. And again, Uriah comes up and screams at her. And like at one point, Ramses is sitting here and she's like, I might have poisoned your wine. And then he's like, I don't think you poisoned my wine. Like he's very gullible.
Like, you need to be.
And Uriah sitting there like, you poisoned him. And it's like, so you need to calm down so
it's
hard.
Like, someone take it up a couple of notches. Someone take it down.
Yeah. And
one of you is too relaxed. The other needs to relax.
Yeah. And she's kind of like, I need to like figure out what's going on. She thinks like Sethos might be using magic, but she's like, that seems impossible for him. But how could he cause such devastation? Like there has to be something deeper.
I mean, he could be a hypocrite.
He could be a hippogriff.
Hypocrite.
I know. Sorry, that's an inside joke.
I
have a friend.
I thought you misheard me. I was like, no, not a hippogriff.
No, I have a friend who every time goes, do you think I'm a hippogriff? And I'm like, no. But she's kind of like, Serene is always talking about like, I will never forgive these people. I need to like murder Sethos. I need to get out of here. And she just wants to get through everything. And that brings us to part 2. And so she like is talking more with Ramses. He teaches her about like this like hidden system of like passageways, and one she can overhear Sethos.
Which is pretty cool.
And so she like goes down, she sneaks away, and they're talking about the war. They're talking about like soldiers who are going from like Savas to Sava. They're like heading down these specific roads, and they're doing something that's like questionable. And like more immortals have been sighted right now, so they're wondering how this is happening. And like immortals are pretty strong and fast, so like and the Ravanasi people are like using things to their advantage. So with how long this war has been going on, they're like kind of battering down the hatches, and they're pretty worried about it. And then there's also this woman in the war room who's discussing things, and like Serene doesn't think she's ever seen the color of her voice before, so she doesn't know who she is. She's never seen her before. And like the rebels might be launching an assault on some of the routes, so they have to be careful. And so she's just kind of overhearing all of this stuff, and Sethos is still saying that like all magic is gone, and like even the immortals will fall, and so would the forest. So they kind of know that something bad is about to happen. And so like she goes to leave, and she runs into people who are like, "Oh, what was your favorite piece of the religion you just looked at?" She's like, "Yeah, that painting over there." Like,
love it.
And so she kind of like tells Ramses what's going on. He's like, "Why would my father talk to a woman? He barely talks to my mother." How depressing. So I just think it's so funny. And they kind of discuss like the differences between their religions and like immortals and what makes them important. And they like talk about Ramses like own like his people, and like he's like, "Well, I come from a long line of kings and we're all so regal." And she's like, "No, you're not real. Like, come on, Ramses.
What about all this war? Excuse you."
And she like they kind of talk about how there are gold jackals everywhere. They have to be careful. And she says that she knows, like, she talks about Hasim from the night before and how she doesn't think he's as with the war as everyone else is. And she's like, maybe I could reach out to him and use him to our advantage to kind of like help you with your dad.
Because she's kind of trying to find an in anywhere with Sethos.
Yeah. And so she's like, well, if I can use him, that would be helpful. And she also wants to figure out like if Sethos murdered his brother or not. So she's trying to like find a way to lead Ramses to that without having to like actually say it out loud, because she knows he will not like that.
Yeah. She's like, this is probably a situation that I need to handle carefully because he will not react well.
And then she murders a rat.
Yeah, which is gross.
Yeah. And we also find out during this time, like in some of these chapters, that like she was trained by a man called Xanxus, and he was kind of terrible. He was called the White Snake. He did sexually assault her. And she does hate him as well. So there is like, is he the person talking to her who's like, he can always find you? She's always worried about him finding her.
And I was going to say there's definite trauma there because you are questioning if this is the voice that she's hearing.
Right. She's like getting closer with Ramses during these times. He's like, I wanted to build a library. And she's like, oh, wow, your father's a huge murderer and you want to build libraries. Like how the world changes.
Interesting.
And so he's like, also like, don't my dad's not terrible. And she's like, yes, he is. He's
pretty
yourself.
Bad.
And she's like, he like thinks she's like super into tragedies. Like he only tells her like sad tales or like weird romances. And it's like, dude, read the room. And he's like, wow, asking one question a day yields very little. And she's like, yeah, I know. And so
that's the point.
So she's kind of like walking around seeing if like the jackals are following her. She's slipping through openings. She's doing research. Like she goes into the library and someone like leaves out of a hidden room, and she's like, oh, this is interesting. I don't know what's going on. And they're like kind of talking about Faldor and like where they're sending ships, and she's trying to find out what's happening when they're sending ships to Bar Elenion and all these different places. So there's just a lot of stuff going on. They're chit-chatting. She's also training more and more. She's getting able to like beat people up, and you find out she's just betting on her own winnings, and like Uria's super mad about it. And she's like, well, I'm just playing to my advantages. Like,
right.
You can't hate, don't hate the player, hate the game. Like, and so Yuria.
Well, she's becoming a more versatile warrior too.
Right. And so then like Yuria is kind of like challenging us. Yuria is challenging us. Come on, I need him to calm down. But like Yuria goes to kind of spar with her, but then Kamau comes out, who's like one of the king's like right hand men. He's like one of his greatest fighters, and he challenges Serene. and she ends up fighting him, and he beats her, and like he goes too far, like he really packs a punch. And Ramses like kind of steps in, or Ramses comes in and he's like, what's going on? Like, you went too far. And it was like, obviously he goes, it was orders from your father, your highness, to like see how well she's doing. And he's like, I don't think that that's appropriate. My dad told me that this was my stuff. And you find out that she is going to be injured for the next month and kind of out for her recuperation, and she's very upset about it. Yuria comes like in to check on her, and she's like, what are you doing? Why are you here? Like, you don't even like cares. Me. He cares. And she's kind of wondering.
We know why he's there.
Oh, and she's also like, because Ramsey's like, why would my father do this? And she's like, he's been testing me for so many weeks. You've got to get with it. And so the next chapter, she's kind of just like recuperating. Yuria finds out she's a drawer. And she's kind of having like memories of this like girl and her mother talking about like the history of the immortals and the Ravanasis. And like, you also do find out in those books, I didn't really talk about it, but her eyes are incredibly blue because of the immortals. So like, it's talking about like why that is. And Rizwana is like around her all the time, seeing like asking questions and like talking about Serene's background. And so these like next couple chapters are her just kind of getting back to fighting.
She's building back up then.
Yeah. And Ramsey's like trying to get everything back in order for his plans, and it does feel like he's a little bit naive when it comes to planning.
A little bit. And I
like,
feel like he's one of those people that has like the best intentions and thinks that everything's gonna go perfectly, and it's like, you guys need to plan more.
Right. And she's like reading up on stuff during this time. She's like doing research. Like she's doing all the research that Ramses refuses to do, where he's like, I think my dad's a little suspicious. And she's like, read a freaking book about the history of your people. It's highly questionable, Ramses. Like, come on. And that's kind of where we end, the halfway point of her being like, could you be a little bit smarter? It looks suspicious. And he's like, no, my dad just might not be good anymore.
I think he just went off the path for a little while.
And that brings us to the first half of The Assassin of Grins and Secrets. Someone who's very secret, except for the fact that she smiles when she murders people. And we find out it's because
that's too much of a tell.
Sansi's once told her to smile more, and she was like, fine. And so now she smiles when she murders people.
Honestly is the best take on women need to smile more.
I do like that. So this is the book so far. So it's been interesting. I think like it's very funny to see kind of a different take on a very stupid prince. Like usually when it's like, I'm suspicious, it's like, I have every right and I've done all this research. And Ramsey's like, I was suspicious, so I came here for you to do the job.
It's like, I'm not going to do the work, but I've heard a couple things and would like you to do it.
I would like you to do this for me. Thank you. Bye. And she's like, you're the worst. And he's like, maybe, but I think I'm the best. Don't you?
I have good intentions.
Oh, yes. So that's it so far, guys. We hope you enjoyed this first half of the plot. This has been
the next half is coming at you soon.
Coming at you next week. So join us next week as we close out the plot. This has a lot of funny moments in it, and I would say like it's harder to do the plot for this particular book because a lot of it has to deal with the world building. I feel like this is a book of world building. And Laura and I are not as effective at discussing that. So if you are interested, make sure you are reading the book to read some of this world building. And then join us next.
I think also too, like with it being the first book in a series, there's a lot of setup. So I think that's something that it's like going to be this overarching plot throughout the series. And we're getting a lot of setup in the first book.
Yes. So make sure you are following along with this book at least, and join us next week to finish up the plot. In the interim, make sure you're going over to our website, OWWR Pod, to check out what's new. I just posted an update to our reading schedule to show you what's coming after. And we have some new things on the horizon that should be announced probably this week on some of the things you should be excited to see from us, because we're pretty excited about it. Again, the schedule's a little bit loosey-goosey. We're kind of hoping, Laura and I had We had planned in time to see how long the strike was going to go on, and if we were going to talk about certain struck work that we would love to talk about once the strike is over.
Sure.
But that may be a little bit later. So play it by ear. So the reading schedule is good for what things we're reading. Some things might get shifted around, but this is what we will be reading. So make sure you're keeping an eye out on that. Join us on Discord, where we would like to chit chat with you guys. Join us on Blue Sky and Threads and all the social media places you can find us at. Just like go look at our link tree. We post lots of it.
And in the episode show notes, like all of our places are listed on there. And where you can find me and Hannah.
And make sure you're joining us on TikTok, where I'm going through some of our older episodes and posting really small highlights, like Shenanigans and Inns was the first I posted, and I discussed about Rand also being a ginger from out of town, and
so many ginger discussions.
Matt being Shenanigans as a personality. So if you want to go listen to some of those sound bites, you said accurate in the show. So I like to call him Shenanigans as a personality, and you go accurate. So at least you're consistent.
I stand by it.
2.5 years later, still saying it. So
funny.
Make sure you guys are looking over at our TikTok just for some fun little highlights from yesteryear. So
and please join us on Discord, because I asked if anyone had read Rooster Fighter and no response. Very disappointed in our handful of Discord. Discord, because no one responded.
All
but
right,
now I'm just going to send it to everyone to make them read it.
Make sure everyone's reading it. Make sure you're joining us on Discord, and join us next week. All right, bye guys.
Bye.